Welcome to Amazing Business Radio with best-selling author and customer service and business expert, Shep Hyken. Shep will talk with some of the smartest thinkers in business to help make you more successful in your professional and personal life. This is Amazing Business Radio with Shep Hyken.
Hello, everybody. It's Shep Hyken here. We're back with another episode of Amazing Business Radio. This episode, we are featuring Jeff Gothelf, who is the co-author of Who Does What by How Much, a practical guide to customer-centric OKRs. OKRs, for those that aren't aware, stands for Objectives and Key Results. And this is going to be a fascinating interview. I can't wait. Before we get into the interview, a quick announcement. If you've got an amazing story that you would like to share, or you have a question you want to ask, just reach out to me on any of the social media channels because I am pretty much everywhere. And if it is a question, be sure to use the hashtag #AskShep. I'll answer the question there in the social channel. And the Shepper Letter, which is my weekly newsletter. If you're not a subscriber, please go to hyken.com, HYKEN.com, and subscribe, or I'll answer it right here on this show. With that in mind, let's jump into our interview. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Shep. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm excited because when I read the title of your book, which is Who Does What by How Much, a practical guide to customer-centric OKRs. So the OKRs, I haven't heard that term in quite a while. And for those that aren't familiar with it, it is objectives, objectives and key results. So I thought, wow. Your company, whoever pitched you to be on the show, did a great job of capturing my interest. So we're going to talk about OKRs as they apply to customer centricity and making good customer-focused decisions. So Jeff, let's just jump right into it. This is your second book. And why did you write it?
So it's actually my fifth book.
It's your fifth book.
Clear.
Well, I only have two of them listed here.
I know.
My cheat sheet.
You tend to forget about some of the others. No, really. But
who are what's your favorite child? Let's not
exactly. So why did we write this book? Look, this book is interesting because I've been thinking about this a lot. The conversations that when I say we, I'm talking about myself and Josh Seiden, who's my co-author and my long-term business partner. And the conversations that Josh and I have been having over the last 15 years together have been sort of backing out or rising in altitude to get to this conversation. So where we started out initially was, how do you build great customer-centric digital product development and design teams? That's where we started. And then we said, great, how do you manage those teams? Our second book, called Sense and Respond, was about how do you manage those teams? And the obstacle that we kept running up against, the feedback that we kept coming up against was, hey, we want to work this way. Hey, we get it that this makes sense, but our goals don't align with this way of working. Our incentives don't align with this way of working. And so we kept bumping up against this ceiling of goals and incentives. And so as OKRs have become popular again over the last decade or so, I really felt like this was our Trojan horse to start to have a customer-centric goals conversation. Because if we can set the right goals, then everything else that we talk about, cross-functional collaboration, customer centricity, and decision-making, starts to be easier to happen and easier to implement. And so that's why we wrote this book, to start to have that conversation at the highest level of the organization.
Great. So we talk about customer centricity, and I would love to hear your definition and description of what the two words customer centricity really means.
Absolutely.
And by the way, I'll share mine too, just so we can compare notes. So
terrific. For me, it's putting the customer at the center of all of the decisions that we make. So every time we make a decision, the question isn't what are we making? How are we making it? Those questions are important, but the critical question is, what impact do we think this will have on the customer? And is that something that we want to do?
That's, by the way, same definition on my side as well. So that's good. We're in alignment there. And sometimes the decisions we make aren't necessarily fun decisions and are going to potentially upset a customer. I mean, when we decide to raise a price, do you think the customer is going to be happy about it? No, but we have to do it in order to maintain quality, keep people employed so that they can service the customer, that type of thing. So sometimes decisions they are met with the customer in mind or made with the customer in mind, but not necessarily meets the customer's happiness factor.
Absolutely. And look, strategically, we may have to decide which customers we're going to serve, and by definition, which ones we're not going to serve. And that plays into all kinds of decisions like pricing and others as well.
Yep. All right. So I've got a few questions here. And the first is from the book. This is kind of, or at least from where you're coming from. What is it, or why is it that so many people end up working on the wrong stuff?
So the conversation we're having is a customer-centric conversation. And the reason why folks end up working on the wrong stuff is because the way that work is framed and often assigned to teams is either product-centric, build me a thing, make it red and be done by Friday, please, or it's revenue-centric, make this much money by the end of the year. And so what ends up happening is that people scramble. In the first option, they just make whatever they're told because that's what their boss told them to do. And inevitably, there are a series of assumptions that are baked into a product-centric goal. Make me a thing, make sure it does these 5 functions, and it looks like this, and ship it by the end of the week, is filled with risky assumptions. Inevitably, some of those assumptions are going to be wrong. And so folks are going to end up working on the wrong thing in the wrong way. And by the time the thing gets to market, regardless of what that product or service is, those assumptions that the original assumptions were based on some facts in the market, those facts have shifted. The pace of change is just way too quickly. So folks are building things where the goal line is in motion, but they're working towards a fixed goal that was set 6, 12, or 18 months earlier.
Right.
So that's one issue. Right. The other issue is revenue, right? So people end up with a revenue target on their back. I used to work at a subscription business in New York City many, many years ago, and the marketing acquisitions team had a revenue number on their back. And whenever that revenue number was perhaps not going to be hit, they just did whatever they could, right, to drive up acquisitions. And it didn't matter what impact that had on the brand, on retention, on anything other than acquisition and revenue, right?
And that's so acquisition of a subscriber.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Acquiring a new customer, basically, right? Acquiring a new subscription customer in that case. They would spam them with 1,000 emails a week, whatever it took, right? And again, that's the wrong thing. That's not customer value. That's not customer centricity, but they were going to get fired if they didn't hit that revenue number. Right.
And you're reminding me of something that they probably offered special deals.
Sure.
Right. Yep. So here's my question. How do you feel? And this is very, I guess it's done with a lot of internet cable providers, even cellular phone providers. If you're a first-time subscriber, you get a much better deal than the subscriber that's been with you and been loyal with you for the last so many years. I know that's kind of off topic, but do you have a thought on that? Because that's what I'm thinking about as you're telling me about. We do anything to get a new subscriber.
Yeah, look, it frustrates me, and I think it devalues the product and the service right out of the gate, number one.
Yep.
I think that folks have learned how to game the system. My brother visited me 2 weeks ago. He's a Sirius XM customer. They do exactly that thing that you just described, where they give you the service for $6 a month or something like that, and then after 6 months it expires, and he just calls up and says, "I'm going to quit unless you give me the same deal." And they set him up again with a $6 a month service. And he's been doing that for 3 or 4 years at this point. I don't believe that is an effective way to acquire customers and ultimately really properly describe the value that you're giving them.
I think what happens is when a customer is so focused on price that's the only thing they're loyal to. If you give me another option, if there's another option to Sirius XM, and there is, I can go Spotify on my phone, and maybe it's even on my car. And see you later, I'm gone. So anyway, I get it. So how can a focus on customer needs enable clear guidance on what to work on? Because that's what we're talking about here. We want to make sure we deliver what the customer wants and expects.
Here's the interesting thing, right? Almost all the organizations that I've ever worked with think about 2 things. They think about what we call impact metrics, high-level measures of the health of the business. So the kind of KPIs that you would see on an executive dashboard: sales, revenue, profit margin, customer satisfaction. They think about those 4 things usually, and they think about the tactical delivery of the service or the product. And what they tend to forget is that in between those 2 things is the customer. and what the customer does. And so what we try to do in this book and in the conversations that we have with the executive teams that we work with is to walk them through the customer journeys, right? So how, like, revenue is interesting, right? What happens before revenue? Right? What happens before that? What happens before that? Right. Well, first the customer comes to walks into our store, our mattress store, right? Why did they walk into the store? Oh, well, they saw an ad online. Okay. So they see an ad online. Then they walk into the store. What do they do then? They lie down on 3 mattresses. Okay. What do they do out there? And I kind of walk them through that process about all of the various customer activities. And then we say, okay, great. Which of these customer activities actually deliver the business results that we're looking for? And then how do we create an environment, a system, a product, a service, a store that amplifies those behaviors in a positive way for the customer? And that's a fundamentally different conversation, right? Because the measure of success in that conversation is more customers in the store, trying out more mattresses, asking more questions, and ultimately buying a mattress, rather than, right, guy with a spinning sign outside asking people to come in. Right? That's a fundamentally different discussion.
Right. And it's important to recognize that you put customer satisfaction in with some of those metrics. And I mean, if people want revenue, companies want revenue, leaders want revenue, great. We're going to go get revenue. But we have to make sure we maintain the level of customer satisfaction that we've always had or want to have or aspire to have. We don't want to drop as a result of just focusing on some of those metrics that you're looking at or some of those objectives. Does that make sense?
It does. And I have a nuanced take on customer satisfaction. If we could just dig into that for a second here. Of course, we want to satisfy our customers. And of course, we want to measure customer satisfaction. What's interesting about objectives and key results specifically is I want you to think about the behaviors of satisfied customers. I want you to think about the behaviors of unsatisfied customers, and I want you to measure that, right? So we want to get ahead of, are you satisfied? Are you dissatisfied with? Oftentimes, dissatisfied customers stop using the product. They show up less often. They spend less money. They stop telling their friends about it. Okay, if we start to see those patterns, then we need to take this action rather than waiting for someone to be like, I'm dissatisfied and I'm quitting, right? At the same time. And so I think it's really important for organizations to keep customer satisfaction at the top of their minds, but really think through the behaviors of satisfied and dissatisfied customers.
Right. It's, I wrote a book titled I'll Be Back, How to Get Customers to Come Back Again and Again. And one of the reasons I wrote it is because everybody was focused on the metric of customer satisfaction. But this one client said, we want them to be happy, but we also want to recognize their behavior, their cadence of their business. And by the way, it was a hair salon organization, which you and I know nothing about. Okay.
Not anymore, not for decades.
But they hired me to keynote speak at a bunch of their manager meetings. They had, and they were great. They probably have several thousand locations over the North America. Anyway, they said, we love when they're happy, but we don't love when they're happy and don't come back. So we know that the typical customer like this is going to be back once a month. This customer comes back once a quarter. So we watch the behavior, we watch the cadence of their return visits. And if we notice they're out of sync, that's when we do a personalized at scale type email or text or some message to say, hey, we haven't seen you in a while. What's going on? We'd love to have you back. And so I get exactly what you're saying. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to continue this conversation, and I want to talk more about OKRs, objectives and key results. We are talking with Jeff Gothelf. He is the author, actually co-author of Who Does What by How Much, a practical guide to customer-centric OKRs. You're listening to Amazing Business Radio. Don't go away. One of my favorite sayings is that customer service isn't a department, it's a philosophy. And it's a philosophy that must be embraced by everyone in the organization all the time, and that's 24/7. So if customer service is important to you, and I know it is, then you will love our virtual training, the ultimate on-demand customer service and experience training program that you can access anytime, anywhere. Now, the course content applies to everyone, regardless of position and responsibility, from senior executives to the most recently hired and everyone in between. You'll discover tips, ideas, and strategies that won't cost your company a fortune, but will produce what I call moments of magic, those positive experiences, and it will happen at every level of your organization. So go to Customer Service VT. That's V as in virtual, T as in training. That's customerservicevt.com. It's time to get customer focused.
You're listening to Amazing Business Radio with best-selling author and customer service and business expert, Shep Hyken.
We are back on Amazing Business Radio. We're talking with Jeff Gothelf, who is the author, actually co-author of Who Does What by How Much, and it is a practical guide to customer-centric OKRs, objectives and key results. Jeff, love where the conversation is going. I especially appreciate how you kind of detoured into that whole customer satisfaction and the behavior thing, because I think that's so important that we recognize that satisfied customers, and I hate the term satisfied customer, because to me, a satisfied customer is not necessarily a loyal customer, but somebody that is happy versus somebody that's not, they exhibit different behaviors, different patterns. And if we can spot the patterns, we might be able to spot the patterns early enough to save a defecting customer. Or might be able to spot a pattern soon enough to recognize we need to give somebody a little more attention to get them to the next level.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you were talking about this before the break about the hair salon network and how return visits was a metric for them. And that's exactly right. When we're talking about customer-centric goals, and especially using the OKR framework for that, return visits is a perfect key result, a customer-centric key result. It's a measure of human behavior that impacts the business, right? So we're looking for when people come back, how many people come back, what kind of people come back, and then trying to understand, like you said, how do we optimize the experience, the customer experience, to drive more of those return visits from those loyal and soon to be hopefully loyal customers as well. And I think that's the critical thing, right? When we set a goal like increase return visits of this type of customer or that type of customer, we're not telling our teams what to do. And that's really powerful, right? Because what it does is it says to the team, I trust you because you're smart and I hired you to do this, right? To go figure out how to best optimize this customer experience to drive this behavior. And the measure of success is not, did you have a sale? Did you add an extra hairstylist? Did you offer, free whiskey with the hairstyling or whatever it is, right? The question is, did you get the kinds of customers that we agreed were important to increase the percentage of, or the frequency of their return visits or something along those lines, right? So we continue to optimize, we continue to look for the best possible solution to drive that behavior. And the reason why that's powerful is because everything changes very, very, very quickly. And so just because something worked today or a week ago or a month ago, doesn't mean it's going to continue to work. And so it keeps us on our toes.
Right. I also think that when you have the goal of making sure this customer is happy and they exhibit this certain behavior, I think you also have to make sure that that behavior is in alignment with what you think is driving the behavior. Because why does this customer keep coming back? Are they happy with us? And then you talk to them, well, there's nowhere else I could go to get it. But what if somebody came in, a competitor came in, and they were a little bit more convenient, or they just happen to be next door? Then are we going to be able to keep that customer? Are they going to keep coming to us? So I think that's another piece of it, not just meeting the objective or getting the key result, but understanding the why behind what's driving that behavior.
100%, right? So in my neighborhood where I live, there's a supermarket across the street. There's a supermarket a half block after that. And then there's a local fruit and vegetable market 2 blocks beyond that, right? For me, like the easiest thing for me to do is to go across the street. So the supermarket that's a half block further has to really work to get my attention. And the fresh fruit and vegetable market really has to try to get us over there. And for us, it's important to not only buy and support local produce, and we make the extra effort. If they understood that about me, right, which I don't think they do, right, I think they would actually, do things more actively, more proactively to retain my business. Because there are days where I'm lazy and I'll just go across the street.
It's easier. Sometimes easy is why we give people business. I wrote a whole book about that as well, the convenience revolution. But that's not what this is about. So how do teams work through this OKR creation process that is the framework of your book?
Yeah, so there's two parts to it, right? Objectives and key results. The objective is a qualitative goal that describes the end state you would like your customers to experience. So qualitative means it's gonna have a lot of superlatives like the best, the easiest, the simplest, the most accurate, things of that nature, right? What is the end state that you'd like to create? We'd like to create the most convenient way for people to shop for their weekly fresh produce. In North America, something along those lines, right? So it's qualitative. The key results are the measures of human behavior that tell us that we've achieved that state. And we get to that question by trying to figure out what will people be doing differently from what they're doing today to tell us that we've achieved that goal. In other words, who does what by how much? Who's the customer? What are they doing? And differently by how much? So, for example, if you're trying to create the most convenient way for folks to purchase fresh produce in North America, maybe we want to see, the average spend of a weekly grocery bill for some specific type of customer be made up at least 15% in fresh produce, where it is today is 5%. So we want to see a 300% increase or something along those lines. But we're talking about the difference between what people do today and what they'll do in the future. And that's what your key results are. So your key results are quantitative, and they help us determine whether or not we've achieved the qualitative objective, the end state that we're trying to create for our customers.
Right. And so we'll create, if we're in that grocery store business or some type of retail where we have that fresh produce, we'll say, okay, what are we doing to drive more produce sales? Do we at the same time take a look at if we start to drive more sales in this section, is it going to take away from some other part of the store or some other part of the buying behavior?
What's interesting too is when that question comes up, and it always comes up, right? What are we doing? Everyone has an opinion, right? Everybody, right? The people who manage the store, the people who lay out the store, the merchandisers, the CEO, everybody, the CFO, everyone's got an opinion. Who's right? Whose idea is best is always a great question. And what tends to happen is the person with the biggest job title usually gets their way, right? With objectives and key results, we can say, great, you know what, boss, that's an interesting idea. And these folks over here have an interesting idea. We're going to test those two ideas, right? We're going to run a produce sale, and we're going to reposition the produce at the front of the store. And let's see which one we'll do one week and one the second week. And let's see which one drives the behavior changes that we're looking for. And so what we're doing there is we're collecting objective evidence to help us make customer-centric decisions rather than I'm the boss and I know what's best, so we should do it my way.
So you mentioned something earlier about empowering people to do what's necessary to reach the key result you're looking for once you understand what the objective is. So somebody's going to create those objectives. Maybe it's leadership, maybe it's a whole team of people. But when it comes to delivering the key results, it sounded to me like you're suggesting there's a level of autonomy. This impacts, I think, positively the culture of an organization, saying, you're good people, we've hired you to do a good job. You know what we need to achieve. Now go out and make it happen.
Exactly. And look, this is why you hired these folks. You hired these folks to lay out a grocery store. You hired them to market the produce, whatever it is, right? And so instead of telling them what to do, tell them what the objective is, tell them what the measure of success is, and let them go and figure out. And the thing to take away from this here, by the way, is that inevitably those folks are going to be wrong about some of their guesses, some of their attempts and assumptions at achieving that goal. As long as they can learn that quickly, and then use that evidence to make a better guess the second time and the third time, we're doing great work, right? And that's the thing to take away here. We don't have to nail it out of the gate, right? We don't have to be right 100% of the time. We're not going to be right 100% of the time. And as long as we can build in this kind of testing and learning system, hey, we took one store and we put all the produce in the front of the store. Guess what? Didn't work. Okay. We spent a week.
Didn't do it in all 300 stores.
Exactly. We took one store for a week, didn't work. Let's try something else, right? And as long as we can build that kind of learning culture, OKRs thrive and succeed, and our customers benefit.
Love it, love it. Well, we're just about out of time, so I'm going to ask my favorite question, which is the last final one idea. And let's focus on the book. What's in the book that you want to share? Make sure everybody remembers when we finish this conversation.
I really want you to take away this idea that everybody has a customer. Now, if you work in a customer-facing job or the thing that you make is consumed directly by customers, terrific, right? But there's lots of us who don't work. We work in marketing and finance and legal and HR, et cetera. I want you to think about the people that consume the thing that you make, right? What do you make? And how does their behavior change when you give them that thing, when you give them that spreadsheet or that budget or that learning and development program? Do they use it? Are they better off for it? Do they ask you 1,000 questions? And think about their behavior as a measure of your success, right? And maybe how you can improve what you're doing to make them more successful. This idea that everybody has a customer makes OKRs applicable across an entire organization.
Yeah. Love it. All right. We've been talking with Jeff Gothelf, the co-author of Who Does What by How Much, a practical guide to customer-centric OKRs. And if you didn't know what an OKR was before this episode, you are now well-versed to go in and make those objectives and key results happen. Thanks so much for being on the show, Jeff.
My pleasure, Shep. Thanks for having me.
Well, that wraps it up. Another episode of Amazing Business Radio. We'll be back next week with another interview. Until that time, this is Shep Hyken reminding you to always be amazing.